Next up, we're going to hear some real life stories. We're going to hear from a panel. And so I have the privilege of introducing Simon, who's going to be the facilitator and moderator of this panel. Simon did such a wonderful job last year, and I know he'll do the same with this amazing panel we've got this afternoon. So Simon is an associate professor of strategy at the Weatherhead School, previously on faculty at schools in the UK and in Switzerland, and a board member of Promise Partners ETA Accelerator. He's been a board member for about a decade. Also a colleague of Richard Osborne and is helping lead the ETA initiative here at Weatherhead. Please give a warm welcome to Simon.
Thanks for the intro, Jeff. I guess if you never change your LinkedIn profile picture, you never get older, I guess. Let me introduce the folks on the panel this afternoon. And if they could come up and take the seat up here in this order. Kadisha Bear, please, Denise Shade, Sean Wenger, Larry Fulton, and John Davies. It's a very large, yeah, please, come on down. Come on down, as they say on the, just not a, hey. Obviously we've got a large, diverse audience here, so I'm going to make the bold claim that there is something for everybody on this panel this afternoon, just given where everyone is in the ETA search process. Let me just quick introductions then. Kadisha Bear, graduate of the Weatherhead School of Management, currently Director of Solutions at Yelp, and she's killing it where she is there. Denise Shade is the founder of Comedo Partners, but was previously at KeyBank, right? Wasn't it? Only for 3 years at KeyBank. Also an alum of the Weatherhead School of Management. See the trend here, people? Where are we going? Sean Wenger. Guess where he's a graduate from? He's the Chief Executive Officer of Precision Communications, a company that he bought about 3 years ago, and previously a managing partner of Promise Partners. Larry Fulton, a graduate of the Weatherhead School of Management some time ago, yeah, and he's the founder of Fulton Equity and a serial ETA entrepreneur. Then finally, John Davies, odd man out here, John. Not a graduate of the Weatherhead School of Management. Dare you? But John had a long career at Progressive Insurance and was actually fairly instrumental in actually getting us the Peter B. Lewis building over there. So there we go. There's a connection to the school. He's currently the founder and CEO of the Merry Meeting Group, and I'm going to go ask John a bit later on to talk a bit more about what that's all about. So there we go. There's the panel. I've got a few things set up for a little bit, but we're going to leave plenty of time for folks in the audience to ask questions as well. All right. Start with Kadisha. And because we've all experienced Richard Osborne, those of you who were ever in his class or in his circle know that he used to like to give you a nickname. You had a class nickname. I never took one of his classes, but I still got a nickname. My nickname was the Saint, for fairly obvious reasons. So the first question is to all of you, when I get you to speak, is what was your Richard Osborne name? Okay, so you didn't have Richard. No, okay, no, you didn't have Richard, but everyone else did. All right, so that would be your first question. But Kadisha, let's start with you. Okay, so probably like some people in the room, you're there thinking, this sounds really attractive. I really fancy doing this. You've actually committed to doing this now. You've actually made that leap. I mean, talk to me a bit about that process and how do you actually, prepare to launch a search? What's the sort of the process that you went through to get to this point?
I love the way you set that up, Simon, because the idea of committing itself, I think, is a process. So I learned about ETA at Weatherhead, and I think prior to that, I always wanted to be in charge. I always wanted to run things. I wanted to build teams. I wanted to know how everything operated. I wanted to know how to make things better, how to be efficient, how to make money. So I always took that approach to my career. It's one of the reasons I decided to get my MBA. But the idea of ever owning and buying a business, it was just completely out of my league. Literally, I was like, my dad's not rich. I don't know how people do that. And so really that spark for me was learning that there is a path to do this no matter where you are today, no matter where you sit today. So once I learned that there was a path that I didn't know existed, okay, now that's something. Now what does this mean that there's this path and where do I fit in? So I'm a little cerebral at times. I like to read a lot of books. So, I picked up, how to buy a small business, Harvard Business Review, Entrepreneurial Leap, I think by Gino Wickman, learning about search funds and acquisitions, and learning about promise partners, which was really instrumental for me too. And so I did a lot of self-assessment on, am I the right kind of person to buy a business, to be a business owner? Do I have what it takes? Have I demonstrated what it takes? What don't I have? What do I need to learn? And after my self-assessment, I said, you know what? I think I can do this, right? And so then I was getting more serious about the path, and fortunately, meeting like-minded people, understanding other people's journeys. And so I did a lot of interviewing of other searchers, people who have searched successfully, people who searched and then didn't continue on with their search. And that was really actually one of my first steps to just assess what's the difference between taking this path and being successful at it. What if you take this path and you don't end up in acquisition? What does that off-ramp look like? How do I prepare myself to be successful? And so really understanding how do I minimize my personal risk, but then how do I also build the type of support around me to start taking the steps to get there. And so part of it was me assessing my skill set as a manager, as a leader, as an operator, understanding all the financial components. I don't have a financial background, so that was really intimidating. And I personally decided the things that intimidate me the first, like whatever I feel the most scared of, is what I'm going to learn first. And that's where I want to meet people and ask a lot of questions and really start to dive in, because I was like, if I can get over those humps, I think that's going to make me better for really being able to go out and do a full-time search and acquire a business. So my journey was part reading, but really largely meeting people, having lots of discussions, asking lots of questions, and just glomming on to the people who have done it before and people who are currently doing it that I could learn from.
Was there any sense, you're no schlub, okay? I mean, you're killing it at Yelp. You're employee number
like 75 or
75
something.
at Yelp, okay? Kadisha's killing it there. So taking that leap is not because you've got nothing else to do, or you kind of, at some point you've actually just got to say, I'm walking away from, a highly successful career in corporate and actually undertaking this path. And we see a lot of people not make that leap actually, and so that's interesting. So you're in what we call the preparing phase now. What are you doing? What else
Correct.
are you doing to help to prepare?
So right now, like because I'm working full-time still,
Yeah.
one of the things I try to do is every quarter really set a goal of something I can put time towards every single week, right? And so like setting the financial goals for me personally, I really examine what would it look like to go out and do a funded search, right? So if raising money from investors, actually having someone fund this for me. I have a family. It's scary to say, okay, I'm just going to leave everything and search full time. So I wrote up a PPM. I really tried to understand that funded search route. And at the same time, I was working on some personal financial goals. And luckily, I hit a point where I was like, oh, I could take this route to look to fund my search. Or if I really buckle down, I could perhaps prepare myself even sooner to do a self-funded search, right? And so the thing I like to do is every 2 or 3 months, kind of pick what that goal is and really work hard and go really, really deep on it. So that way I can prepare for what's next. And so, yeah, a little bit of where I'm at in my prepare phase is like shifting, what's the idea of me going all in, right? So like today I say I'm preparing. So preparing to me means I spend 5 to 10 hours a week actively learning, meeting, doing the things I need to do to make sure this is the right path. All in for me is probably 40 hours a week, right? So my goal is how do I start to make that transition where I'm saying, okay, I am vetting, I'm doing what Denise is doing next to me, and getting to that all-in phase. And so just kind of knocking off one goal at a time, but getting very, very close. You start to feel the momentum build, right? You're rolling down here, it starts to build to a point you're ready to go.
Very cool. Denise, you're a little bit further ahead in the process. You've left banking, you've formed this vehicle, lots of companies out there. Where do you start?
You start first, well, very similar to Kadesha. One is just educating on the entire process. And I felt like my management experience at Key really prepared me well to operate my business. But where I had the gap was understanding how do I go from what is the actual roadmap going from a W-2 employee to owning and operating my own business. And so one of the first places to start was understanding and learning, and Promise Partners was instrumental in this, was learning that there is a well-defined process to operating a successful search. And when you look at the members of Promise, the 65 that have successfully launched and acquired 90 companies, they have honed and tested that process. So the first thing was understanding what that process was. And then the next thing was, then you get down into the nitty-gritty. And for me, that was defining my own search criteria. And then once you define the search criteria and know, and you develop the story that resonates and makes sense, and then it's starting to create a deal flow. And there's lots of different ways to get deal flow. There's websites out there, there's brokerage lists, all sorts of things. But for me, my deal flow has been coming from the network, very targeted network that I've been focused on building. And that starts with people who are actually representing business owners that are selling, like investment bankers or brokers, but also where I find a lot of success is dealing with the people who actually work with those companies and those business owners, like accountants, attorneys, companies like Manufacturing Works, and others in this area.
So they're helping you generate a whole bunch of a universe of possibilities.
Absolutely.
What are the first couple of filters for you, though? What are the...
So, my very first one is, fortunately for me, my network has really been generous in introducing me to owners that are thinking about selling that haven't maybe listed yet, right? So they're a little earlier in the process. So one of the first things I have to do is I have to vet, are they really serious about selling? Because this is their baby, right? And it's one thing to say, yes, I'm like at a certain age and I should be retiring. And it's another thing to say, I'm ready to sell this. And so just to save everybody a lot of time, I have to vet how serious the person is about actually wanting to do a transaction. And then there's some just logistical, like checklist. I'm looking at EBITDA margins, I'm looking at the quality of revenue, and that includes reoccurring and also client concentration. I want an industry that has some sort of tailwind associated with it as well. So there's a checklist that I will follow.
Very cool. Sean, so you've done this, you've been through the search, you purchased the company. Some of the people in my class, we actually do a simulation of Sean's purchase of Precision Communications. It's a tremendous company. It builds really, really tall TV transmission towers. But okay, so you bought the company. You've become the CEO. Congratulations, well done. A lot of energy has gone into that purchase. Yeah, you can have a whoop for being the CEO. Yeah, he's become a CEO. Yeah. It's not that many. All right, so now the fun really starts. What do the first 90 days look like when you've become the CEO? What's going on there?
So I think there was, the plan of what the first 90 days was going to look like and what the first 90 days actually looked like, Simon. I love the search. I love the academic exercise of looking at deals, looking at companies, meeting people, understanding how I would add value to that, whether it's different products, different services, different markets that we could go into, efficiencies you can find in the business. But then you get to, the first day, and the only parallel to academia is you're the new kid at a new school mid-year walking into class. Everyone's looking at you and saying, how is this going to work? And had a couple of really interesting, experiences early on. One was, through due diligence, you'd meet with the ownership team and kind of talk about what's the team, who are the key players, who are the folks that are really instrumental, understand how they're programmed, understand, what's, is important for them as they move forward. But I had an interaction with one of the key, kind of thought leaders in the business, and it was a really important dinner that I had with this individual, and it was clear this person was going to go back to the rest of the team and say, hey, we like Sean, we don't like Sean. So kind of his characterization of the situation, he's like, it's like this, Sean. It's one day your mom tells you, we're getting divorced, and you and your mom are living together, and it's fine. Then one day, she sits you down and says, Sean, you're getting a new dad, and but he's going to be great. But he gets there and he's not great. That's what we're worried about, Sean. So it was just interesting getting that insight. So it was my goal to be a good dad, from that point forward. Another, we talked about business operating systems, and I was fortunate to work in organizations that had great systems, great business operating systems. At the time, one of the companies that I really kind of learned this was using the Rockefeller habits. One of the keys in their process, they would do kind of this daily huddle where you bring the leadership team together, you do kind of a positive check-in, what's something positive that's happening in your life, but then you talk about what am I working on and what do I need support on. Just kind of a morning huddle. It's really great. So I introduced this quickly on, and I got a call from the owner, and this is a couple weeks in. She's like, Sean, the team is really struggling, and they think maybe I made the wrong decision. I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And she's like, you're doing this huddle, and you're asking them to share things that are positive, and they just don't like it. They just they feel like it's mechanical, and the point was, in their world, being this team that had worked together for 20 plus years in some cases, the way they got to know if things are all right wasn't a morning huddle, right? It was you'd go to Sharon's office and say, hey, how's it going, Sharon? Oh, I'm doing well. How's your grandkids? So really, there are some key learnings on this deal, and just in terms of the pace, right? We've got all of these ideas of how we're going to integrate the business, to grow the business, but in our case, we focus on healthy businesses, right? We're not in a turnaround situation. So one of the first things that's important to me is really understanding what has driven, what are the keys to success. This company's been in business, or this, in our case, 30 years. What are those keys, and how do I not mess that up, right? What are the things that are really important that we want to preserve before we start bringing in all of these other growth ideas that we've got a hypothesis on the front end of what that may look like. So that was kind of big key lesson. And then with a lot of these companies, and this is this is what I think is just such a real opportunity. I spent a big part of my career in working in a big Fortune 100 company. A lot of these smaller opportunities, even though they're successful, they're really profitable, they just don't have the systems in place. They do things the way maybe their parents did or their grandparents did. And so by coming in, bringing in some simple blocking and tackling, whether it's advanced financing, whether it's sales and marketing, we work with the Ames Institute. So Jeff is here. It's been really great for us. Going back to that initial story of hey, the check-ins, but it's also we have a system, we have scorecards, but early on, it was about the people. So how do we build both the processes from a blocking and tackling perspective, but really focus on how do we develop the people to really get us to the next level. So there's a lot going on in the first 90 days, Simon, but kind of key learning is really focus on those relationships. Those are the folks, particularly in a service business. That's our biggest growth lever is our people. So like I said, going in versus what actually happened, I needed to pull the throttle back a little bit, and it's worked out well.
How are we doing after 3 years? What's the? How are we on plan?
We are on plan. So yeah, we actually bought a company. I've got 3 partners in the business. 2 are here today. They're all Promise Partners members. So Pitch for Promise. It's a really great environment to find folks to do big things in your life. And one of where we specialize is when you have owners that really care about their people. There's some different people have different goals. Through the search process, met folks that they just wanted the highest dollar amount, and as soon as they sold, they just wanted to put the business in the rearview mirror, and they were done. They were probably already checked out. When we can find an owner that really cares about who's going to come in and take over, I mean these are 30-year relationships. These are people that have created this business owner's wealth. These are people that they've been to weddings and birthday parties, baptisms, bar mitzvahs, that's where we can really stick out. So, for us, it's finding those folks that'll potentially do something different in a deal structure for us, because they want the business to go to us, because they know that they're going to take care of our people. So first and foremost, we were able to get a really great structure on this deal for that exact reason. And then we just had some wind at our back. The timing, we closed on March of 2020. I don't know if you guys remember what was happening that time. It was interesting time to close on a deal. But some market conditions and some of the new things that we're doing in the business, we've been really fortunate, and certainly ahead of where we thought we would be at this point in the business.
Yeah, that's an interesting feature of a lot of the promised deals. There's the time that goes into that seller relationship management, and because the reality is we're rarely going to be paying the top dollar. There's always a chance that there's someone out there, there's a strategic out there that's going to be able to pay more. But yet we get the deals done. It's interesting, isn't it?
And they just have different math, right?
Yeah.
If I'm in an industry and I'm buying a competitor, you both have accounting departments, you can cut one of those, right? There's efficiencies that are built into their pro forma.
Yeah.
Whereas, for us doing pure, ETA, we need all of those people.
Yeah.
So, but like I said, you got to know where your swim lane is. I'm not there's we've got some incredible private equity folks here today. They've got the ability to do some really amazing things and resources that as a small organization, that may be a perfect fit.
Yep.
But for us, we kind of know what our swim lane is, and when we can find the right seller, we can create some really advantageous, structures on both sides. Win-win.
Yeah. I forgot, what was your Osborne name?
So it was Zeus with 2 O's. So kind of going to the zoo and gorilla. So, but I don't know. That was 20 some years ago. So
That's just terrible spelling. Denise, what was yours?
Mine was Sunshine. So
Obviously.
my last name is Shade.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. Yeah, clever. Yeah. Larry, it's come to you.
Big L.
Big L. All right, Big L. I no further questions then for Big L. But I mean, so you've done a bunch of these things. You've bought a bunch of companies. This is something and you did it yourself. You were self-funded. Tell us a little bit about the advantages of self-funding, and then I want to come and ask you a bit about the selling process, actually.
Yeah. So before I talk about the advantages, I'll say this. I too did not have a rich father and mother that could just write a check, right? They just couldn't write several $100,000 for me to go out and buy my first company. So, I took a longer approach. Went through, really, I got the bug when I was in high school. And so I knew just by reading, by talking to a lot of different entrepreneurs, that being an entrepreneur myself, I didn't necessarily know how to go about doing that, but that's certainly something that I really wanted to do. I was very passionate about that, right? So going to college, I majored in business administration. I took the lowest paying job here in Cleveland because my parents moved back to Cleveland, but that gave me a chance really to come here, live with my grandparents in the city of Cleveland. And for those of you who know me, I grew up in the South, had acres of land. I used to love to hear birds chirping and frogs and snakes and stuff, right? And so coming into the Inner city of Cleveland was a little different for me, but my focus at that point was really to save money so that eventually I can go do my first acquisition. And it took me quite a bit of time. Went through corporate America, took the lowest paying job to do that, but I worked my way up, ran a division, and then I found that I was at that point able and really ready to do my first acquisition. So I'm sorry, I kind of got off on a tangent.
No, it's
but
good.
what was your?
I can't remember. That was so good. I mean,
okay.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. No, I guess. The guys this morning were talking about different models of funding your search, and I mean, so you basically did it yourself. The reason you didn't look for partners?
Right. Yeah. So for me, I think some of the advantages are obviously you can pivot fast. You can make decisions on a market, on a particular business. You can structure the deal the way that you'd like to structure that deal. You don't necessarily have to be confined to making an investment decision over a 5 or 7 year period. You can do a longer stretch. You can basically control. You don't have a reduction in equity. You have the equity of owning that business. So when it comes time for distributions, you're getting 100% or whatever that percentage is of the distributions. And so there was a number of different reasons why I chose to go private and just do it myself. Now, consequently, if you're doing it yourself, unless you have a lot of money, you're probably going to do an SBA or like a smaller types of deals. And I started off doing SBA-related transactions and then bolt-ons that were the same kind of SBA model, and then really create significant value by organically and then bolt-on acquisition growth as well. So it really paid off over a long period of time. But case in point, the very first company I bought in 2003 was a company called DP Products out in Middlefield, Ohio. And through bolt-ons and JVs and other stuff that I wound up doing throughout the years, I grew that business into Lefco Worthington and was able to sell that 19 and a half years later. Because I didn't have partners that told me, Larry, now's the time to sell. Or Larry, don't pivot in this particular market. Or let's look at, or don't look at this bolt-on acquisition. Or whatever those kind of strategic initiatives are as well. But that was my decision. And I reaped the rewards or the losses associated with that as well.
Well, let's talk about that then. So you owned that company for 2 decades. Talk about the sales process for something that has been a big part of your life for 20 years.
It was huge.
Yeah.
So Lefco, it was just a great experience for me as well as the team. I'd say throughout the years, we won 2 Weatherhead 100 awards. So we had just great growth throughout the years. The sales process. So I'll tell you this. Because I've been on both sides of the tables. I've financed and done hundreds of deals in my corporate days. And I knew that one of the things that prevented successful transactions is that individuals are not aware of what that process needs to look like from their internal business positioning. And so one of the things I do, and I say this all the time, is if I acquire a business or I'm running a business, I want to make sure that that company is positioned to sell as soon as humanly possible, meaning that operationally, there's processes, there's procedures that are written, they're captured, there's cross-training. If there's a management team, that team is running that business without my day-to-day involvement. In this case for Lefco, we did just that. I mean, we had processes on every workstation. Our facility was clean, it was neat, it was organized. We had an impeccable safety record. Our financials, our chart of accounts were very clean. We had all the financial metrics in place. We worked on customer concentration throughout the years, supplier concentration throughout the years, employee issues throughout the years. And when it came time for me to sell the business, I had all of my records were already digitized. I said, here's the deal room. And 3 months later, the deal was done. And so that process, which was traditionally a very challenging, long-out process where there's a ton of questions, it was fairly simplistic for me, quite frankly. I focus on margins. And so I wanted to make sure that Lefco had EBITDA margins that were 20%, because that's my target that I'm looking at. And so I know just through doing an acquisition, hey, the better you can make or the more profitable you can make that company from a margin perspective, the more attractive that you're going to make that, right? The less you have customer concentration, you don't want that customer concentration over 20%. That could be potentially disastrous, right? And so just kind of working on what those indicators are that normal searchers look for on a day-to-day acquisition basis. Do that in your business, but do it as early as you possibly can so that when it comes time for selling that company, your health could change, right? The market conditions could change. Your business could change. Your employee base could change. COVID could happen, right? And you really can't anticipate some of the significant issues that could possibly happen. So be prepared.
No, very cool.
Yeah.
Good job, Big Al. John, welcome. Tell us a bit about the Merriweather Group and particularly how it fits into the sort of this ETA sort of infrastructure that we're building here in this region.
Sure. Yeah, Simon, it's Mary meeting, so that's okay. It's the name of the company. I founded Mary Meeting back in the 90s, and we're a family-owned business. My children and younger colleagues really run the company now. But I'll just briefly describe what we do, and then I can kind of go back to the origin. But we invest in lower middle market and sometimes middle market companies. I think right now we own 15 different companies. We've owned, I think, 35 over the last 25 years. And, it's been great. For this group, probably one thing that we do, or two companies that we own that would be of interest. We own the largest business brokerage firm in the United States, so we sell about 1,000 businesses a year. And so all these things you all are talking about, we deal with those things every day, buyers and sellers and valuing and financing and all these different things. And we also there's a trade association for people that do that for a living. And there's about 1,600 or 1,700 members. We run the trade association for the industry. So I'll offer right now, I know a lot of people in that business, and you can track me down through Mary Meeting if I can ever help you. I'm glad to do it. That you were just describing creating your network of people. It's a common situation. It's always helpful to know some people who are on the inside of the ecosystem. Just kind of by way of background, I guess I'm an accidental entrepreneur, different than all of you. I used to be an executive at Progressive. I was at a board meeting one day, and somebody said it would be a good idea to sell this part of the company. I didn't necessarily agree with it, but it was part of what I did, so my ears perked up. And we chatted back and forth, and they said, well, we need you to go sell it. And I said, well, how much money do you want for it? And they told me, and I thought it was kind of an absurdly low price. So I said, would it be okay if I bought it? So here we are 25 years later. So there's a lot of ways to do this. Sometimes you just kind of sitting there and the apple falls on your head. And you look around and say, like, geez, I guess that's an opportunity. I could go on and on, but the one thing I can tell you after doing this is that there is no one singular way. And as our business evolved, our primary business is investing with young entrepreneurs that need to be recapped. And I always joke they have 120% of their net worth tied up in the business. And they have very just practical needs. They want to buy a bigger, their wife, or it could be their spouse, wants to buy a bigger house. They want to pay off some debts. They want to put $1 million or whatever in the bank just to get their personal, security squared away, whatever. And then we partner with these people, and on some of those people, we're on their third. They've got a business. They started another one. We sold one, and they got another one. And it's a way of just leveraging our time and human capital. If you stay in this business long enough and you're lucky enough, your human capital becomes much more precious to you than your financial capital, and especially when you get to my age, there's more sand at the bottom of the hourglass than there's at the top. So Simon, that's
a great.
kind of our story. We're sticking with it.
I enjoyed that. I mean, so aside from absurdly low prices, what do you look for in the people that you invest in? What are the sort of, are there some traits and some commonalities amongst you know?
Well, as I said, it's really, and we have partners that run companies that are, they stay in as equity partners, and they run, our model is somebody else runs the business, except for, I think, 2 or 3 of the companies that we own. 100% of, we have employees that run them. But we have people that are, one of my partners went to Wharton undergrad, he went to Harvard Business School, he was a very successful corporate executive. And we have at least 2 or 3 people I can think of that didn't graduate from college. And it's an interesting thing, and I'm saying this to encourage you. My son used to be an M&A attorney at Jones Day, and for those of you, there's a lot of really smart people there. And they work really hard and make a lot of money. And my son frequently says to me, how does this guy, I won't name, nobody would know, he doesn't live in Cleveland. He was one of our partners. He said, how does that guy make more money than a partner at Jones Day? And I said, well, he knows how to make money. And you got to kind of know the guy. He's, didn't graduate from college. He's, kind of slovenly, but we've been in a number of businesses with him, and he knows how to make money. And that's a hard thing to identify in somebody. So what we usually look for, the one common thing, is we try to assess people's personal integrity, and their, and their value system. Do we think we can get along? Having business partners in portfolio companies, it's like a bad marriage. If you're, it's you just don't want to be in those kind of deals with the wrong person. And so we've had a few misses, but we've been amazingly fortunate, in selecting people that we really get along with, we have fun with, and that are, really astute business people.
Yeah. So what advantages do you think that Merry Meeting brings that maybe a more standard, private equity shop doesn't?
Well, I'll tell you what, our sales pitch is, number one, I think Larry was saying it, that we're self-funded, so we don't manage money for anybody else. And so we have control over whatever we decide to do. I would say it's a committee of 1, and now 2, our son and I. But we don't need to exit at a particular time. And for a lot of the younger people, I say, if you want to stay with us for the rest of your career, we'll just keep doubling down or whatever. We tell people, because we're doing, they're basically recapping from normally 100% ownership, the founder, into typically, we like a 50-50 position. Our sales pitch is, you're going to decide when we're going to get out, because you're going to be holding too much financial risk. Just have a concentrate. It's just owning these businesses, and Larry can probably attest to that. I don't know if that was the reason why he divested himself of his company, but it's just like your personal investment portfolio. It's you don't want to even, I'll say progressive because it's my former home, even as great a stock as that's been, you probably don't want to have 90% of your net worth tied up in Progressive or Key Corp or whatever else. But so usually our partners will say, listen, I've had enough, or I want to diversify, or I want to go on my own. I don't want you as a partner anymore. Nothing personal. Just, I'd rather own 100% whatever I do. And we say to them, listen, we've got a lot of lawyers and CPAs and all sorts of smart technology guys that you couldn't afford to hire. We have a holding company with about 25 employees that they work on the portfolio companies, and I like to think I can add some value. But I guess it's your point about the family. A lot of our partners call me their business dad, and that kind of sums it up. They just like to, be reassured on decisions from somebody that's, been through things. Yeah.
Nah, good stuff, John. I'm going to toss it open in a moment, but just before I do, I want to just come back to all of you. Obviously, all at very different stages of the process, as we call it. I mean, how was, Promise, I want to tip of the hat to Pat Morris and Kevin and Scott and people. What has Promise done that's kind of been the hack here in one sense that's helped you? What's a key thing that Promise has helped? I mean, we think we've got a playbook that we think we can sort of follow a bit. What have you found? How's it helped you?
Two things I call out. I think one is just doing a real hard assessment of yourself, which is really important, like taking stock of where you're at and understanding where you can go. And then second, connecting you to just a great community of people. I think everyone in the organization wants to give back at whatever stage they're at, so you're able to really learn from people who have been successful and who have been on the path, and really just like literally sit down for coffee and pick their brains. And having that kind of access to people is tremendous.
Yeah, very cool. Denise?
Yeah, I think very similar, and what I referred to earlier is the nuts and bolts. Obviously, very much a clear roadmap. This is what successful searchers or searches look like. But also at each stage of the way, there's help within the Promise organization, and also help coming from regardless of where you're at. So whether you're preparing or you're searching or in Promise Speak, we would refer to Sean and everyone that's direction on the panel as heroes too. So wherever you're at in that process, there is a heavy cultural element of paying it forward. And that's tremendously beneficial and something I just love being part of on both ends.
Yeah, and an accountability that comes along with that paying forward attitude.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Sean, anything you've got? I guess specifically in your case, you buy a company for $10 million. There's no point. You're not trying to keep it at $10 million. You're trying to make it 20 million or 30 million bucks. Because you're still very engaged with Promise.
Yeah, I think, as I look at the value, I think it's a few things. One, early on, it was the roadmap that was given to me in terms of being backable. So, like several folks, I didn't grow up in a family business. So, if I'm looking for an investor in an ETA type scenario, what are they going to be looking at if they're making a large investment in those type of opportunities? So, really that roadmap of having sales experience, operations experience, finance early on, that was really helpful in terms of making career decisions to round out a skill set that was backable. I think a big thing is just the inspiration. I'm looking at Kevin and Pat and Barb, like these folks are on my Mount Rushmore of entrepreneurial heroes, but they're not just people you meet in a class. These are people you get to know, and it's just, it's inspiring as you have a longer journey, seeing something tangible and having people that invest in you along the way. And then I think, as you get closer, it's the how-to. It's resources like we have today, meeting with folks that have done multiple deals. They know the path. This is something that is replicable. You don't have to go through this, the first time. So I think this community, this ETA community we have in Cleveland, and I think around the nation as well, as I learn about what's happening at University of Chicago, Stanford, this is just a community that is looking to help folks. And thanks to Richard, showing me how to do this. There's almost my passion to give back and show others how they might be able to do it. So I think for those that are interested, I think it's several-fold. It's a roadmap, it's inspiration, and it's the how-to go from employee to owner. And I don't think there's a better group than we have in this room today that can help you if that's your goal.
Larry, I know you've got a list there of stuff I've not let you get to.
Well, I was just going to say I don't have anything to offer on that topic because we're looking at it. If you look around this room, this is an incredible, ecosystem, and it's a testament to that. But the list is really, it takes like 1 minute to go through this. These are 10 takeaways.
Like that.
All right. And so, number one would be look for companies with the following: positive cash flow or a trajectory that shows a potential, an industry that you're familiar with, a diversity of customers, and we talked about customer concentration being less than 20%, a long-term strategic growth plan or a business that you could see yourself enjoying. Number two would be to develop a methodical process towards performing the acquisition. Just don't go in blindly, actually have a process, right? Number three is create a clear motive to buy a company. What's the why? Is it diversification? Is it efficiency? Is it IP? Is it transformational? Why buy a particular company? Number four, don't fall in love with a deal, and especially don't overpay. There are no emotions when it comes to acquisition or actually in business itself. Develop clearly defined metrics, deal metrics. Understand average valuation multiples, goes back to don't overpay. And know that this is the single largest purchase that you will more than likely make in your lifetime. So don't screw it up. Number 5, don't skip on due diligence. Be thorough. It's the only time you'll have a chance to audit the company before buying it, right? So verify everything through data. Don't just take someone's word. Number 6, doing a deal is ground zero. The day after is actually day number 1. So focus on integration. Don't get mixed up and think that that's it. Like doing the deal is like it. No, it's not. It's like the pre-day before the actual day, right? Number 7 is surround yourself with people who are going to support you through your ups and your downs. Because as an entrepreneur, you're going to have many ups and you're going to have many downs. Okay. Number 8 is create an advisory team to hold you accountable. Even the best of us, we need accountability. We need accountability partners, and don't take that lightly. So form a board of directors or form an advisory board and listen to them and allow them to hold you accountable. Number 9, develop a strong understanding of financial accounting and the ability to interpret financial statements. So really understand your P&L, your balance sheet, and your statement of cash flows and how those interact. And number 10, lastly, develop your personal credit. Bankers know as this, refer to this as the 5 C's of credit, like market conditions, your character, which is really your credit score, your capacity to pay, which is really your ability to repay, your income and your personal debt levels, and then capital, so the amount of cash that you have available to do a deal, and what that looks like after that deal, and then collateral. Obviously, that's your personal assets and your business assets after the deal is done, or to help support the acquisition. So,
Cheers, Big L. John, any last words? Or?
And you're just wanting to learn from Promise Partners? I mean, I didn't go through that program. I do think it is very valuable to surround yourself with people that are actually doing this. I was just thinking of an old story. I did this one. A friend of mine, who's a prominent guy here in Cleveland, said, "Hey, would you meet with this guy who was thinking about leaving?" I forget. It was a big company here in Cleveland. I can't remember, but he was asked a lot. He was a bright guy. He asked a lot of questions, and at the end of the dinner, he said to me, "He said, well, John, you don't. No offense, but you don't really seem that smart. If you could do this, I could do it." And I said, "Well, thanks, I guess." So yeah, it is helpful to meet people. You say this isn't something that's you read about in a book. Just regular people could do it.
Very cool. Okay, I did promise some questions. We got quite a lot of real estate to cover here. Do we have some microphones around? I mean, I got one there. Okay. Yes, please. Is it just you who are doing that? I mean, hi.
Yeah, I have a question for Larry. So it was a term that this is my first time at the ETA conference. It's great. I love the energy. And it's the second time I've heard the term going from employee to owner. And a lot of talk about the impact and how this is mission driven, right? It's what really distinguishes this community. So my question to Larry is to maybe expound upon the sale of Lefco in the sense that going yourself from employee to owner, and then maybe talk a bit about when you sold it, what happened with some of the employees of Lefco, which I think dovetails really nicely with the mission of everyone probably in this room.
So a couple of points. Actually, me personally, when I left corporate America, very similar to you two, it's a hard call, right? I mean, it's really difficult. You're making really good money. You got benefits. You're have position and status and all that, and so the guarantee of having a check that comes in every two weeks, right? Or in my case, once a month. And so it was just a really difficult time for me to make that decision. How can I afford myself? But I was able, through just growth and doing my first acquisition, actually my second acquisition at that point, I was able to finally make that transition from an actual employee to a business owner. So I didn't just step out and do it back in 2003 when I did my first deal. I literally couldn't afford myself, and I knew that. And so I didn't want to overtax the first deal that I did. But I'll tell you this, when I grew Lefco, and I knew that it was a decision point, a very pivotal point for me to sell that particular company. You know, I had a lot of different options. I could have sold to a financial buyer, any one of you in the room, a strategic, or try to figure out a scenario where I could sell it so my employees could actually become owners. And I was approached by Evergreen Cooperatives to do that deal, and eventually they would turn or allow certain employees to buy into the ownership. And for me, that was a way that I could give back to the team that were running that business so successfully, because I couldn't do that when I owned the business. And so it was just a great opportunity, so much so that my kind of mission right now is I'll buy a company, and if the GM wants to own that business, I'll work out a scenario with them so that they can buy the business. Case in point, I have a fiberglass manufacturing company called Handling Composites, and my general manager, who I just hired in June, he's doing a phenomenal job. At the end of this year, he gets granted 5% equity, and then a year after that, he'll get 5% more equity. And the reason why is because I want to make sure, and this is, I'm in business, right? But I want to make sure I have a built-in owner who, along the way, and it may take him 3 to 5 years to actually buy the business, because we're working on certain things to make sure that that business transaction is going to happen fluently. But I want to make sure that he's going to be fully committed. And immediately, he was extraordinarily committed to running that business the way that I wanted it run. Right? And he has his own spin on it as well. But in addition to that, it's a life-changing opportunity for him. And for me, that makes me feel good. So I'm not just in it just to make the money, but really to create a life-changing opportunity for those who I work with. That happened in the Lefco deal. This is going to happen in the Hanlon deal once he's ready to buy. And I'm working with him on his credit. I'm working with him on, on the metrics of the business to make sure that it's going to be financeable. And that process may take a few years, but he is so ready. So.
All right. Very cool. I'd love a question from right back there.
Thank you so much. This question might be geared more towards John, just because where he is in his career, but also to the others who are thinking about buying a company. We spoke a lot about going from employee to CEO, but can you talk a little about maybe going from CEO to manager of a portfolio of a number of companies that you might own, and not necessarily selling one and then buying another one, but maybe holding one and buying another. When you execute that strategy, are you looking for your CEO replacement right away? Do you look to not operate, or do you just let that happen naturally? And if somebody comes in and wants to be CEO, you'll just get bumped up. So I'm just curious to hear from all the panelists about that strategy of building out a portfolio and not necessarily going from one company to the next.
Well, I can tell you how we did it. Again, real simply, we have a holding company, as I briefly mentioned, and then you've got all these portfolio companies. So in our case, I mentioned there's 3 companies we own outright, and we have employee, non-equity CEOs in those companies. I mean, they're very well-paid people, and if we were to sell the company, they would be rewarded handsomely for their performance. But all the other companies, usually as the founder is retained ownership. So it's kind of a given who the CEO is going to be. They're just perpetuating from their current, their former position before we became their partner. At the holding company level, several of you mentioned you got to have a vision. Our vision was my wife and I are very family oriented. We wanted to build a company we thought was of such significance that our children would want to stay in Cleveland and work in it. And they actually, I'm kind of a fraud here, our kids really own the company. So we had put it in trust a long time ago. So our children and younger colleagues really run the show, and they pretend they listen to me now and then. But so it was a given who was going to be running the holding company. But it takes a different working through other people, just like being any manager, working through other people that are running companies and working with CEOs. One of the issues we're dealing with, my son's in his late 30s, and it's a different. He gets frustrated. I could say the same thing to one of our partners that he did, and just because of my age, it has more gravitas than perhaps if he were to say it. And so we're dealing with that issue. But our fundamental is, I always tell the guys, both legally and practically, they run the company. And my philosophy is on portfolio companies, as soon as you start to usurp decision-making authority, you've lost all accountability. Because then the person is going to say to you, hey, I'm just doing I wanted to do this and you said no, and so you deal with it. But that's just kind of management 101. So.
Any more questions from the floor? We've got time for a couple more. Go on. Please.
For Mr. Fulton and Mr. Davies, what type of companies do you consider? What type of industries?
So actually, great question. It's almost like a lead-in because I'm doing a search right now. And so I just sold in April. I have a couple of companies in my small portfolio. I'm certainly nothing like John and his family, not yet anyway. But I'm doing a search, and so typically what I'm focusing on are lower middle market businesses. If you think of 5 to 50. 5 to 50. I can pull the trigger on that valuation size. Obviously, the higher you go up that continuum, the more I have to bring in outside equity. And the lower, obviously, I don't. My sweet spot, I would say, would be 10 to 20. I can do that without outside equity. Industrials. So if you think advanced manufacturing, value-add distribution, B2B service type businesses, location or geography-wise would be Northeast Ohio primarily. But deal flow is king. So I've opened up my search to Houston, Charlotte, Atlanta. You can get to Atlanta in 2 hours and $125. So why not, right? And then from a valuation perspective or returns, I'm valuing companies somewhere around the 4 to 6 times. If I can go lower, that would be great. But on average, I'm willing to really pay around that 4 to 6 time model. That's I think that's pretty much it.
We're beside the people, which I mentioned before. Probably the biggest issue for me is scalability. So we start with a premise, and this, I don't want to get too involved here, but we try not to compete with what I would call real private equity groups like Riverside or, not like a search fund or something. But, and so, because in our opinion, they drive the multiple valuation that goes up too high. So we're value conscious. We're looking for good deals that we feel are scalable. And we again look at all these things like a portfolio, just like you would your own personal investments. If a company gets to be a certain size and we can get a high multiple for it, we're willing to sell them. That's typically driven by the partner, because a real life example. We have a partner who started out he went to college. He put himself through school. He started his first business when he was 18. We invested with him when he was 26. We had a chance to sell a company a year ago when he was 32 or 3. He might have been 33. And he still owned half the company. He's got enough money that he doesn't need to work anymore if he doesn't want to. He's already started. We've already started another company with him, but it was driven by him on the exit. So scalability, I think, is the number one thing. We can have a fantastic business, but if it's never going to go beyond a certain point, and that's all going to change over time. If your whole enterprise is making X and then it's making 10X, the scalability factor changes. But same concept. Yeah.
Look, guys. Thank you. I'm going to hand this back to Jeff on time. I just want to finish by saying, some of the longer tenure members have promised when they would go through Richard's class, you know, and they would have this sort of light bulb moment when Richard would bring in someone like a Mal Mixon or a Barb Lindsay or a Kevin Shaw. And I think you guys are the sort of the modern day Mixons and et al. Because, you know, when I bring you guys in the class and Scott's class, you know, again, you actually see that moment where people go, oh, I've never thought of that. We could actually do this. And, you know, hopefully today, you know, you've experienced that light bulb moment if you're in the preparing or searching phase, or you've learned from Sean if you're an operator, or Larry and John for doing it over again and again and again. So look, panel, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Oh, don't go anywhere. We've got swag. There goes the school's budget. All right, Jeff, I'm handing it back to you, aren't I?
All right, let's have a big round of applause for Simon as well for moderating. What a beautiful job. Here's what I'd love to do, just building on what Simon just said, give you an opportunity to reflect, get you into some small group shares, and then we're going to have a break. That's my commitment to you. We're going to have a break. There's some additional refreshments outside. So let's get into that quickly. Hopefully you had a light bulb moment, something that you heard from one of these panel members that really stuck out to you. And so if you turn to page 18 in your workbook, you're going to see a few questions here. These are thought joggers for you. I'd love for you to reflect on what you heard from each of these panel members and just take a moment to write down 3, 2, and 1 things. 3 biggest insights or learnings. And if you can't think of 3, what's one big one? What's one big light bulb moment that you had listening to the panel? Second question is, you think about what you heard across all of the panel members. What are some themes that emerged for you? Maybe 2 big themes that you heard across their stories. And then finally, the third question is, who is one panel member that you'd love to just take a moment to acknowledge or appreciate? All right, so 3 big insights, 2 common themes, 1 person from the panel you'd love to acknowledge or appreciate. Take 60 seconds right now, just reflect on those answers. Mark, if you could cue up a little bit of journaling music, that would be amazing. Okay, here's what I'm going to encourage you to do. In just a minute when I say go, similar exercise to before, I'd just love for you to get up out of your seats, maybe find 1 or 2 other people that you haven't connected with yet. If you noticed the different colored name tags, maybe try to find someone with a different colored name tag that you're going to connect with as well, and just share what are 1 or 2 or 3 of your biggest insights, a couple themes that you saw emerge, and 1 person that you specifically wanted to acknowledge or appreciate. Share quickly 4 or 5 minutes in your small groups, 2 or 3 people, and then we'll invite you back to your seats to do a few large group shares. All right, groups of 2 or 3, have fun. Here's what I'd love to do. 2, 3, maybe 4 folks. Just love to hear a key insight you took, a theme, or someone from the panel you'd love to acknowledge or appreciate, and we'll get a few shares. Right up here.
So one of the things was obvious from our discussion in our group was how great it is that we're seeing people in the panel, especially 2/3 of our panel were what we would call diverse, women, men, and a lot of people think that business owners are usually, bald white men, and they're finding out today that no, there's actually, if you look across this room, a lot of young people. We're going to be blessed to see a bunch of young people here shortly. So business ownership doesn't have to be constrained by maybe what we have heard in the past.
Love that. All right, who else? Would love to hear one or two more. We've got Kevin right here in the middle.
I wanted to acknowledge John Davies for two insights that I thought were terrific. One was that human capital has become more important to him than financial capital, which I thought was interesting. The second was that he hoped to create a business that would draw his family home, which I thought was wonderful.
One or two more shares. Right over here, Lauren. It's a race. Scott or Lauren, who's first?
I'd like to acknowledge Larry and ask if there's any way we can all get a copy of his top 10 list, because I think that'd be really helpful.
Love it, love it. Awesome, and thank you, Larry, for that. It is recorded, so you'll get the recordings after this. Well, one or two more shares. One or two more shares. Right over here.
I've been volunteered. What do I do? Okay. Anyway, I'll just talk loud. It seems like there are a lot of people here that own businesses, have the green thing. Not all of us are like up there, though. And I've heard a bunch of the people up there say, I bought for $1 million and I sold for 50, or something crazy like that. And I think the difference is that the people up there are really good at buying well. They're very good at driving growth. And they're really good at selling well and getting that good multiple. And that was a huge takeaway for me. Is like, you can own a business and that's great and that's a start. But what I've heard today was really inspiring as far as like really pulling multiple levers at once and really coming up with something.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Love it. I'll leave you with this before we go to break. And when we come back from break, we're going to talk about the role Weatherhead's playing in ETA. We're going to see some student pitches and we'll do some crowdsourcing to finish. Someone shared this last week in an event I was facilitating. They said K minus A equals 0. K minus A equals 0. And so when I really think about the share here, knowledge without action equals nothing, right? And so as you think about the inspiration you're pulling from the panelists or other members here, what are some of the actions that you can take? What are some things that you can do? Because it's really those small actions that pull the big levers moving forward. So thank you once again to the panel. Thank you once again to Simon.